When participants join. Right, I see people are joining. Give it another few seconds. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad you could join us today for this informational webinar for the second envisAGE call for innovations. We're glad to have you here. Just a few notes. We're going to present a little bit on the call for innovations, provide you with some information, and we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So for any questions you have, please enter your questions into the Q&A section in Zoom, and we will look to answer those questions by the end of this webinar. And we should have a good amount of time for any of your questions at that point as well. So today I will be presenting with Marc-Olivier, and I will begin the presentation. So my name is Michael Krastowski. I'm AgeWell's Business Development and Partnerships Lead, and also the lead for envisAGE on behalf of AgeWell, supporting projects and community labs within envisAGE. So this webinar today, our intent is to make you more familiar with the process for this second call for innovations, and to give you a better sense of how to work towards a full application. And just a note for anyone here, and if anyone on your team could not join, this webinar is being recorded and we will be sharing it later on. So let's begin. First of all, we are grateful to the Strategic Innovation Fund program, Stream 5. It's funded through ISED and the Government of Canada for making envisAGE possible. So the envisAGE initiative is pan-Canadian, and our mission is really to help grow and catalyze the AgeTech ecosystem in Canada. And we do that by supporting innovators, innovative small and medium enterprises, and also those who are willing to implement and scale those technologies in order to help older Canadians and caregivers. This is a joint initiative that has been put together by MedTech Plus, which is a consortium in Quebec, and AgeWell, which is a national network in aging and technology. The objectives of our call is really to continue to help support the innovations and the technologies that are developed in Canada by bringing them into real-world environments, whether care settings in long-term care, senior living, home care, community, or other settings, wherever older adults live or caregivers are active, in order to support them and improve their quality of life. And we do that by working with small and medium enterprises or SMEs from across Canada. And really, by doing that, we'll be looking to achieve the objective of growing and scaling these companies and their products and services across Canada and eventually beyond. So for this call for innovations, we have 8 priority themes that are inspired by the 8 challenge areas that AgeWell has validated over the years. So you can see all of them here, but they are autonomy and independence, cognitive health and dementia, healthy lifestyles and wellness, staying connected, which is the flip side of social isolation, supportive homes and communities, healthcare and health service delivery, mobility and transportation, and financial wellness and employment. And really across all these challenge areas, you would pretty much capture any aspect of supporting older adults and caregivers. But we certainly invite you to learn more about them and see where you are kind of moving the needle or helping to solve problems when you work on aspects of your proposal and application. So who can apply? So we'll get into the different stakeholders and types of applicants, but mainly to begin, the lead applicants are either Canadian small and medium enterprises that have a mature technology, and that would be a TRL 7 through 9, And also, when we say TRL 7 through 9, we mean a technology at that readiness level that is able to serve older adults and caregivers. And we'll talk more about this later, but we're certainly receptive to companies that were initially targeting other kinds of demographics and are now looking to serve older adults. We definitely welcome that, but there's a certain level of readiness required for envisAGE when it comes to looking to apply technology to a new segment. And the other potential lead applicant are the community labs, and these are really the partners and projects that bring the technology into the lives of older adults or caregivers. These are organizations that provide services and supports, care or housing to older adults or caregivers, and they're committed also to innovation and potentially to adopting technologies and innovations within their operations or services. So with envisAGE, we're really built around creating these collaborative projects. So I'm going to break down this diagram here. With this call for innovations and the guide for applicants who we're hearing about, there's a lot explained around the main stream of projects that brings together the innovative small and medium enterprises together with a community lab, each of which may be a lead, but definitely will work together within a project and bring them together with an envisAGE beachhead. And the beachheads are there to really help validate the technology and the project, to evaluate the different KPIs that you jointly agree on, and to also help validate the impact and progress you have achieved so that the SME is better positioned to scale beyond the project itself. Because with envisAGE, we're definitely not looking just to create one-time pilot projects. It's really all about setting up these companies and technologies for scale beyond that. And that involves both the SME working closely with the community lab and also the beachhead doing the kind of validation and evaluation that's required. But in addition to that, there's another type of stakeholder or entity that can participate in that mainstream of projects, and those are innovation hubs. So there are 5 innovation hubs within the envisAGE network, and we certainly invite you to go on the envisAGE website to learn more about them, as well as the envisAGE beachheads. These innovation hubs have an ecosystem-wide purview. They have usually a national presence and expertise in different areas, whether it's AI in healthcare, policy and practices, aging in rural and remote regions, digital health, or sensors and data. And they can often bring expertise to projects that may be desired for the mainstream. And so they can be brought into the kind of projects you'll read about in the guide for applicants. They can also work with SMEs that are looking to do different kinds of projects, and this can include those at earlier TRLs. So I know I mentioned TRL 7 through 9. The innovation hubs can work with companies from TRL all the way up to 9, but as early as TRL 4. And so they have the ability to sometimes do earlier stage work with companies, and we invite you to either reach out to us or to them directly. But our role as envisAGE is to bring these different groups together for projects and also to work with you in supporting matchmaking, which we'll speak of. When it comes to the projects themselves, we will be supporting them within envisAGE through a partial reimbursement of incurred eligible costs. So you'll learn a lot more about those today, but especially in the guide for applicants. But the idea is that when a project is approved and it begins, you're then incurring expenses. And when I say you, I mean the SME, the community lab, the beachhead, and if applicable, the innovation hub. And every quarter, eligible expenses are submitted for partial reimbursement by envisAGE. And then there's also obviously a certain portion of the costs that are covered by the participants and collaborators in the projects, and then as well as we'll talk later, sometimes by other funders. Just going again to the technology readiness level. So first of all, we mentioned that this program is really about supporting the AgeTech ecosystem, and so AgeTech we look at it as being fairly broad, but really it's technologies that are there and at this point are intending to enhance the lives of older adults or their caregivers. If I think usually you'll have a pretty good sense of whether you are in that category, but certainly we invite you to check with us, and it's something we'll be looking at when you are submitting different aspects of your proposal. In terms of the readiness, we mentioned we're looking at TRL 7 through 9. And so what that means, and especially for technologies that maybe were developed for different populations initially, is that, to get to TRL 7, you have already piloted your technology in a setting that is appropriate. So, for example, involving older adults, and makes it acceptable to consider it as being TRL 7 for the purpose of you applying. And for those that are in an earlier stage, just a reminder again that there's also the ability to work with innovation hubs on projects with them. So this is kind of an overview of the process that you would go through. So we'll speak to this here, and of course there are more details you can read about. But right now, one of the things that we've opened up is the ability to submit an expression of interest. And so that is important for this call for innovations, but we'll also keep that process going year round. So you'll always be able to submit expressions of interest. But those that submit are either a small and medium enterprise or a community lab. So when you do submit the expression of interest, depending on what time of year it is, and in this case, we're right in the middle of a call for innovations, we will then be able to process and help you work towards the further stages for the call. But what would happen once you submit the EOI is we'll look at basic eligibility, we'll be doing some due diligence on the SMEs, and we'll be also doing matchmaking. So it's very important for the company to be clear on the type of technology they've provided and what its potential benefits are when they submit the EOI, and also to be clear on the technology readiness level. And for the community lab, it's important to be clear on your need, because we need to have a good understanding of your need in order to do proper matchmaking. So with our matchmaking program, we'll look at the needs that have been expressed. We may have some more conversations with you to flesh those out further if needed. And we'll be looking at the SMEs that are eligible and trying to do some matchmaking, sharing information from the EOIs with community labs, and maybe vice versa, and having that ability to create a match or a dyad, as we call it. And like I said, that matchmaking may happen continuously throughout the year, but in this case, we're focused on this period leading up to the letter of intent. So letter of intent is what you would submit together with an SME and the community lab. So this letter of intent, the deadline for this call is December 2nd. Now, you may already be partnered with a community lab, or you may be a community lab that already knows an SME. You're more than welcome to work together from the beginning and directly work on the letter of intent. So if you are to do that, then that's something you can do at the beginning. We still welcome you if you'd like to submit an EOI and provide information to us. It helps us with future matchmaking. So we do invite you to do that anyway. But all that to say, you may have your own match already. If you don't, it'll be something we'll work on. And while there's no guarantee we'll be able to match individual organizations, we'll certainly do our best and work with you and others in the ecosystem to create those matches. So you'll work together on submitting the letter of intent, like I said, by December 2nd. And at that point, we will be reviewing those. And there's another stage of matchmaking, and that's where we look to bring in a beachhead, which is required for this main stream of projects. And that search requires that we already have the dyad or the SME and CL having submitted a letter of intent. But again, perhaps a beachhead has already reached out to you in the past, or you may have that connection. That's also possible. We ask you to indicate that connection in your letter of intent as well. There's also the option that you may have indicated in your letter of intent that you'd like to work with one of the innovation hubs that you've learned about. So you would also indicate that you may have connected with them already, but if not, just make it clear in the LOI, and that is also part of the matchmaking that we'll do after that stage. So that matchmaking will happen, and then at that point, we have either what we would typically call the triad or the SME, CL, and beachhead. or maybe all three of those and also the Innovation Hub. Once you have at least the three of SME, CL, and Beachhead, you're able to work on the full proposal and budget for your project. The other thing to keep in mind is that you will be supported by account managers throughout the process. Essentially, from the time you submit an expression of interest, someone on the envisAGE team is assigned to you, and will eventually you'll have someone that's assigned to your dyad or your triad or four organizations. They'll be there supporting you, answering questions, giving you feedback on things like that, helping to make sure that you put forward, the strongest and most appropriate possible full proposal. And the deadline for that is March 18th of 2025. So I think my overall comment on this process is, submit your EOI as soon as possible and work together with us, but also work on your own to make sure you have the partner required in terms of an SME and CL. We're all in it together, but we also count on you. And make sure that you do reach out as needed to us and your account manager once you meet them to get questions answered and make sure you're clear on the process and any of the aspects of the applications. So as I already mentioned, if you already had that partner, you can go straight to the LOI. The only note to make here is if you've never gone through our due diligence process as an SME, that will be done once you submit your LOI. So we'll still need to do that to make sure that you are a fit for the types of process, the reimbursement process, and make sure that we're good in terms of all the eligibility and things like that that are outlined in the guide for applicants. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Marc-Olivier.
Great. Thank you, Michael. So in the second part, I'm going to talk about the budget and funding, since it's a funding program for your project. How does that work? Basically, once the triad is done, so at least the three partners are there, we get together and we discuss the budget. So each partner will have their own separate budget on the project, their own spending. That can be like human resources, material, subcontractors, travels, and all of that. So anything related directly to the project, each organization part of that project will do its own budget. And we'll look at this together, try to find other sources of funding to complement that. The program basically reimburses 25% of the total cost of the project, but you can have up to 75% of total eligible funding from public sources. So if by any chance you have any other programs that can complement the envisAGE project, please go ahead and contact them. We also are there to help you make sure those two programs are eligible, but yeah, you can stack funding in there. So each organization do their own budget. We do this budget development part. We give you a reimbursement ratio for each partner. And after that, we discuss sources of funding. Either the rest of the contribution comes from your own pocket, or you have this other sources coming from either it can be private, public, federal, provincial, local sources. So philanthropy, we've saw many different possibilities of co-funding partnerships. And how does that work, the funding of envisAGE? So you are allocated a percentage of reimbursement, and that reimbursement process will occur every 3 months during the project. So every 3 months, you can submit a claim with all your expenses related to the project, and you will be reimbursed a percentage of that. And so if you have a salary of $100,000 for your employee, and you have a 25% reimbursement ratio, on that 3 months, you submit the $25,000 for the expense of your employee. You get reimbursed 25% of that, so $5,000 that you're giving back. And that cycle is every 3 months. And that will be going on for the entirety of the project. And each partner will submit its own claim for its own budget, so you are not dependent on the expenses of your other partners during the project. To make sure all of that goes smoothly, we have a training for both eligible expenses when you're building your project at the start, and also the reimbursement process, make sure everything goes smoothly and we can make it as simple as possible for both you and us to make this process go smoothly, since it's gonna happen every 3 months. We're here to help you and make it as simple as we can make it. So next slide. Yeah, so basically the rule is that we reimburse 25% of the total cost of the project of each partner combined, but that will be declined into 3 separate percentage of reimbursement. Normally what we saw in this first call is SME getting between 15 and 25% of reimbursement, Community Lab between 20 and 30%, and Beachheads Innovation Hub getting up to 50% reimbursements. And that will depending on the ratio of all of that. But you have an account manager to work with you. We have templates to make sure all of that is calculated smoothly and easily. Don't pull your hair on that. You'll have someone to help you with this. And what it look like. So if you can go to the next slide. It's gonna look like this. First thing that you need to see when you see that, each parties have their own spending. So you see the SME have a $600,000 spending, the Community Lab is a $400,000 and $200,000 for the beachhead. Each of them has their envisAGE reimbursement ratio. That's the line in the pink or salmon. I don't know what that color exactly is. You get the 20% for the company, 24 for the CL, and 50% for the beachhead. One thing to keep in mind for the beachhead, the academic institution, they can have up to 100% public reimbursement. They don't need to have that minimum of 25% coming from private sources or from their own fund. Basically, that is something that is required for Community Lab and the SME. That at least 25% of that salary for your employee, for example, is coming from your company and is not coming from public sources. And that will be your responsibility to make sure of that. But yes, in this example, we have all partners maximizing their public funding through imaginary sources. But if you have any in mind, it is really helpful to have more leverage on that project combined. So we can always come back to this example if you have questions, but I'm gonna skip directly to the next part. Just want to mention that it is not an official announcement. It was announced, I think, in spring this year. But the MEIE, the Economic Innovation and Energy Ministry of Quebec, gave an additional support to envisAGE to the projects that are being led by Quebec-based SME that have their headquarters in Quebec and Quebec-based non-for-profit organizations. So these two types of partners will be able to receive additional financial support for their projects. And for the exact amount, we'll have to discuss with you and your account managers. So that's going to be either me or Michael or someone else. Discuss with you the amount that will be able to be attributed to your company or your non-for-profit organization if you're based in Quebec. So we'll discuss the amount further down the road. So at this point, how to apply? Go to our website, envisAGE. You have everything there. So there's a list of the beachheads, the academic and professional institution that are there. Maybe you know some of them. You want to contact them about the possibility of a project, and if they're interested. There's a list of the innovation hubs also there. So go see those two partners. On the website, you also have the Call for Innovation guide that is basically reiterating all the eligibility criteria that is necessary for you to participate in this program. So there's a lot of information out there. If you're interested in knowing what kind of projects is possible, we also announced 16 projects that were financed in the first year of envisAGE. So all the list of these projects are on the website, can give you a better idea what kind of evaluators or the beachhead, what kind of institution can be a community lab, or what kind of technology is admissible. So it's a good idea. If you're unsure about your own projects, of course, just contact us. You can contact us directly at the email on your screen, so project@envisage.ca. There's either projet, like it's written in French, but also the if you write project with a C, it both works. And just to let you know. And yeah, we can make sure with you that your project is aligned with envisAGE. Is it an AgeTech project? Is always a gray line there? Is it, are we an admissible entity? There can be some gray lines, so we're here to help you and take calls with you and discuss that. And that's it for the presentation. So now we're gonna go in the Q&A section. Don't hesitate to use the box at the bottom of your screen to write a question. And I'll read those to you, Michael.
Sounds good.
So can those slides be shared after the presentation, the webinar?
Well, yes, so both the slides can be shared, and I know there's a question about recording. Slides and recording will be available afterwards.
Yes. And for now, if you need a recording, you can just contact us. And after that, I think it will be available on the website. So if we have a previously submitted an EOI, should we update or resubmit the EOI? So I think the question is related to an EOI being submitted last year. Maybe.
It depends. So if basically, well, there wasn't an EOI last year, but if you haven't submitted EOI before, or you submitted an LOI last year, it won't hurt to submit an EOI. You know, maybe things have changed for you or you want to update it, so you can definitely do that. However, you can also, if you have already submitted an EOI, perhaps in this past summer or in September, you are not required to resubmit it unless something has changed for your company compared to what you originally submitted. So, for example, maybe you have a new technology or a different kind of technology you weren't originally going to focus on, then it might be useful for you to at least get in touch with us, even if you don't submit a new EOI. But we would want to have the most up-to-date information on your technology itself.
Thank you. And next question, are US SMEs allowed to apply?
So the short answer is no, but if it's a company that is active both in Canada and the US, one of the main requirements is that the headquarters are in Canada and that most of its operations are in Canada. So I'm going to assume with that question, you mean SMEs that are mainly either US based or mainly active in the US and trying to enter the Canadian market. So unfortunately, those are not eligible for this kind of funding.
Thank you. Next question. Given that the submission date is March 25th, what is the typical date for announcement?
So yeah, the submission date is actually March 18th, and we expect that the projects will be announced sometime in June. It's always kind of hard to predict that exactly, but we do use an external evaluation group, a project selection committee of experts across the sector, industry, and innovation. So it will kind of depend on that process after the submission, but our expectation is probably by June, around June, we will be able to announce them.
Great. And if you have a partner organization that may be keen to participate but are not registered tested bed, what will be the process?
So for that type of organization, which we refer to as the community lab, it sounds like you would be potentially submitting a letter of intent with them. Because when you say registered, I assume you mean they haven't submitted an expression of interest, which is okay. They would not have to in that case. They could submit with you a letter of intent, and then they'll be added to kind of our system and pipeline. And I
All
should
right.
add, based on the other question, that organization, the community lab, should also be Canadian in order to be able to participate in the program and receive funding.
Right. And we have a question about the matchmaking process. So for a community organization that are interested, is there a current list of SMEs that can be reviewed? Or how does that work?
Yeah. So hi, Christy. Yeah, we are going to be able to share information about the SMEs based on the expressions of interest they included. What we want to try to do is to help the community labs filter through. So, we wouldn't necessarily just send like a large mass of information, and that's why we need to understand the needs. However, when we reach out to the community lab, like, we're certainly open to sharing, more than the initial batch of SMEs we share. So we will be sharing all of those. They're not listed right on the website, but we obviously collect that information and we'll be able to share it with community labs readily. So essentially, I would recommend for you and for other community labs to submit an EOI so we know that you are open to receiving that information, and then we will send it to you.
Thank you. Next question. Can company distributing technologies in Canada participate in the technology tested? Participate if the technology is tested in another country?
So does the question mean that the technology would be tested during the project in another country, or it has been tested? If it has been tested in another country and it's a Canadian company and the project will take place in Canada, that's definitely fine. If the question is about whether the project can take place in a, I guess, quote unquote, a community lab or a testing site in another country, that's where there could be an issue. And I'll let Mark-Olivier answered as well, but basically, there's a pretty tight cap on any expenses that are incurred outside of Canada, and if first of all the community lab itself must be Canadian, so we would still expect that the majority of activities are happening in Canada. I don't know if you want to add to that, Marco.
Yeah, I can add that the distributors are not admissible in envisAGE. The program requires the company and the SME with the company to have its headquarters in Canada and own the IP of the technology. So it can mean different thing. If the technology, if you buy technology as well and you refurbish it and adapt it to a new technology here, you own the IP and you are allowed in the program. But if you're a distributor and you're trying to add a project on a technology that you don't have the IP of, that would not be admissible. Question: how much funding are we expected for each collaborators? Are we expecting for each collaborator? So maybe we can go back to the ratios that we presented in the last slide. So if you're an SME or community lab, you can have between those percentage you see at the screen. There's no maximum amount. So either your budget's going to be 100,000 or $1 million. We still follow the same percentage of reimbursement.
Yeah, and if you're asking about how much each collaborator should be spending, again, it varies. You can look at the guide for more on the ranges, but as Marc-Olivier said, there isn't reasonably there is not a cap or a limit. But in terms of a minimum amount, I mean, we still expect projects that are able to achieve some of the kinds of impact and demonstration of the technology that the guide outlines. So, I mean, we're certainly talking projects that have some meaningful size. And I think it can, don't quote me on this, but in the past we've seen projects that can range in size from anywhere from 400,000 and up in total across the three collaborators. But you can find in the guide the minimum that we're expecting. And if there's something different that you're considering, then we actually encourage you to reach out to us and talk to us about that.
And thank you. And I just want to add that we expect product to be of length of 12 to 18 months mostly. It can be a bit shorter, it can be a bit longer, but this is pretty much the range we're expecting for you to have this process of pre-implementation, implementing the technology, having it being integrated long enough so you can measure the KPIs and the value of your technology in a real world setting, and the post-implementation collection and evaluation of the data. So yeah, between 12 and 18 months, and so that can also give you an idea of what kind of budget will be incurred in your project. Next question: can one of the community labs submit proposal with more than one SME?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it might be relevant to several people. So the answer is yes, you can submit LOIs for multiple, like you can submit multiple LOIs as one community lab. Similarly, an SME may have submitted more than one with different community labs. Whether that will end up leading to you submitting multiple full proposals, and it will depend, and we'll probably have that conversation with your account manager as well. But as was mentioned, there will be matchmaking with the beachhead as well. And so we'll have to probably see where that process goes. But obviously, if there are multiple matches made, even for multiple LOIs you submitted, then we'll talk then and also discuss the capacity of the community lab or SME that has submitted more than one.
Right. Thank you. Um, so next question, is there any option to have a list of SMEs and community lab and test beds on the website for the opportunity to connect and explore joint opportunities? Or is it always blind with the envisAGE team facilitating in the backend?
Yeah, so in some cases and in some provinces, for example, there may be opportunities for community labs to be listed expressing their needs. That is sometimes done in consultation with other beachheads that we work with that work at the regional level and are looking to share those. But at this point, what we are doing is those EOIs are submitted, so we understand the needs expressed. And then we look to share technologies with them. And for those community labs that are open to learning about any and all SMEs, then we'll certainly share those as well. But we're trying to help facilitate their ability to process the information and find a match. So at this point, we're not listing any and all of them publicly. And so that's also important for community labs to know. If you submit an EOI, we're not going to be listing you publicly and saying that you're open to, meeting people, any and all people about projects. It will be facilitated through envisAGE.
Thank you. Can an applicant can act as both the SME and the CL? For example, an SME with technology and a senior arm.
So in this kind of case, we would ask you to reach out to us directly and we'll talk through it and better understand the situation. So, I mean, the answer is not an outright no or anything. We would prefer to have that conversation separately and see what the situation is and see if it can potentially fit in the program.
Mm. Yeah, and we have next question that's pretty much the same in there. What if the organization is a potential fit for multiple categories? For example, SME and lab. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so yeah, I mean, probably the same question, although I will say the innovation hubs and beachheads are kind of have been selected through a process in the past. So we're not looking for entities that are submitting through an EOI or through this process or call for innovations to say that they are their own beachhead or their own hub. You will need to be matched with one of the approved ones. And certainly, if you have an interest in the beachhead program and you're that type of entity, we encourage you to reach out for us. I believe there's an intake through the website, and we will kind of follow up and talk with you about that. But otherwise, for SME and community lab, that's what we just answered. So certainly open to talking to you about that situation.
all right. So next question is to clarify, do the community labs need to contribute cash to the project as well, just in kind? So as that works is that each will have their own spendings. So we could call that in kind. That's employees, for example, of the community lab working for the integration of the technology. And that in kind is sufficient. So if you have human resources putting in 200 hours in the project, well, those 200 hours, you provide pay slips for the employee and proof that their time spent is put directly on the project. And from those pay slips, we reimburse a percentage of the amount paid. So in that sense, there's no need for cash to go outside the organization, but you will need to expend money to those resources to then get reimbursed.
Yeah, I mean, just to add for those that have kind of been familiar with other projects or programs where you may submit or contribute in kind to a project, it's kind of what Mark Levy was just saying. If we're talking about in kind where someone in the organization is saying they're contributing 10, 15 hours to the project, for this program, the only way it gets reimbursed is if their time is directly contributing to the project. Even if it's like a project management standpoint. But that needs to be kind of tracked and like Mark Olivier said, submitted in those quarterly reimbursement process. So in that sense, we know that those were hours directly contributed to the project, and so expenses were incurred to contribute to the project that way. And it's a little bit different than how organizations sometimes state that, some, let's say, member of the organization is contributing in kind some hours, but not necessarily tracking them. So that is an important part, and certainly more information on that will exist through the claims and reimbursement webinar that was mentioned.
Thank you. Next question, can we start incurring expenses after submitting the project? So the expenses you incur are only admissible once you receive your letter of approval. And so if you submit in March, the letter of approval will come in June. And the day you receive your letter, your expenses are admissible to reimbursements. If you were in a hurry to start a project and the envisAGE is not, well, it is important, but not necessary for you to go to the project, you can start incurring expenses before receiving the letter, but those expenses won't be admissible for reimbursement. So we had many types of projects in this first wave. Some started a bit early and understood that these expenses before the letter were not admissible. So it's a possibility, or you wait for that letter of approval that will be coming in June to start incurring expenses. Have any community lab completed an envisAGE project with funding through Can Health Network as well?
Well, completed is the word there. We just launched our first, or announced our first project. Some of them are underway. None of them are complete as of yet. I don't know if I can answer this question right now. I do know that there were a couple that were working with the Can Health Network, and I'm pretty sure some of those funded have also received funding from Can Health. And that likely includes community labs as well.
Right. And question, is it necessary to have a beachhead to submit an EOI? So it is not. At that point, if you submit an EOI, is that because you are looking for partners for envisAGE to help you find your other first partner, which is either an SME or community lab, and but in either way, we can help you further down the line find a beachhead for your project. We have this network of, I think, 7 officially announced beachheads that you can find on our website, and we will present those letter of intent to them. So that's why we need the document before December 2nd, I think, to present all these possible projects to the beachhead, give them the opportunity to go through those, understand what is the technology that needs to be evaluated, raise their hand saying we have the expertise and the capacity to evaluate the project, and then we create connection. But all of that will be done through us. So you really don't have to have a beachhead at that point.
Yeah, and just to be clear on that, I mean, you don't need at the EOI stage, and you don't even need at the LOI stage, as we just said.
Okay. Will all the beachhead be able to support SME and CL match with them in any provinces across Canada?
Well, that question, I guess, is broad. You can interpret it different ways, but I know I can say that some of the beachheads will work with SMEs and community labs from across Canada. Obviously some of them are based in a particular province, and maybe it's easier for them to work with those, but we have pan-Canadian projects that span BC to Prince Edward Island actually, and that is able to be facilitated. So for the most part, the beachheads are able to work with projects anywhere in Canada.
Thank you. For next question, is there a limit of projects that can be accepted by one beachhead? So there is not a number official, but we of course are working with the beachhead, make sure they have the capacity and human resources to lead all the projects they want to participate in. And so for now we have 7 beachheads. We're gonna have up to 10 beachheads in the future that's gonna be officialized. And between those beachheads, they'll be split all the opportunities to evaluate projects.
Yeah, and so we do continue to add beachheads, and it's quite likely that by the time that matchmaking is being done, there will be more than 7 to work with. Just the number can't be stated yet.
All right, so that was our last question for now. We can always stay 1 or 2 minutes extra if you have any question that comes into your mind you want to ask us.
And also, please, that's one of the things we try to say. So I see there's a question, but we do like to get questions anytime, even outside of this. So if you're unsure or want something clarified, make sure you reach out to us, and we'll definitely get answers for you.
Yeah. And for next question, do you have an online list of all the beachheads? For that, yes, it's on our website at envisage.ca. You can then you have to click into the partner tab of the program. So you'll have there all what the definition of community lab, SMEs, eligibility criteria, but you also have the list of beachheads and innovation hub. So I think, yeah, if you click ecosystem at the top of your screen on your website, this is where you will find the list of beachheads. And second part of the question is, does that include their specific needs and requirement? And for that, no, the beachheads will be, they are experts in evaluation that can evaluate a vast amount of technology, I'll say. So it will be their role to identify if they have the expertise for that. I think we should, between all our beachheads, they should have all the expertise needed for all 8 teams that we are aiming at in this call for proposal.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, and just again for clarity, it's not really about the needs for the beachheads, it's for the community labs to see their needs, which, like we said, we will understand internally. But yeah, the beachheads, as was mentioned, they cover all of the areas between the full beachhead network. So yeah, so again, the needs, we will be looking at those through EOI submitted by community labs, and we also invite any SMEs to reach out to potential partners to see if they want to work together on an LOI, even if those partners haven't submitted their own expression of interest. They may want to just directly work with you on a letter of intent. Okay.
All right.
So I think that might be all the questions, but we do hope to continue the conversation with you. And like you said, we invite you to submit the EOI sooner rather than later. And then for the SMEs, when we're doing any due diligence, we'll be doing the matchmaking in parallel. But the easier it is to work with you on getting through our questions around the due diligence, the better it'll be, because we will have to check some boxes around there. So hopefully we can work effectively and efficiently together. But we're definitely excited about engaging with all of you, and like I've been saying, supporting you along the way in the process to build some great projects.
All right. So pleasure to have you in the room and answer your question. We are also always available through the email at the end. So project@envisage.ca or info@envisage.ca. We are behind those emails, so feel free to contact us if you have something you want to talk with us directly. And if not, that'll be it for the webinar. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.